It started with her text. "Hey, sweetie, can you help me out again this month? Promise I'll pay you back soon." I didn't think much of it the first time. Family helps family, right? But it wasn't just once. It became every few weeks, a new story, a new crisis. First, it was, "My car broke down." Then, "My rent's late." Then, "I need to cover Dad's medicine." And every time, I believed her. Because that's what I do, believe people. I'm Margaret Pierce, 68 years old, retired school secretary, wife of 45 years. And I've always been the kind of person who thinks a little kindness never hurts. I'd lived my whole life in a small suburban neighborhood just outside Portland, the kind of place where everyone still waves when they drive by, where the grocery clerk knows you by name. And then came Elaine, my husband's younger sister, 51, sharp as a tack, with a voice that could sound like velvet or venom, depending on what she wanted. The first betrayal wasn't loud. It never is. It comes dressed as concern. One Saturday afternoon, Elaine stopped by unannounced. She breezed in wearing a beige trench coat, oversized sunglasses, and the kind of perfume that filled every room she entered. "Oh, Maggie," she said, setting her bag on the counter. "You look radiant as always," I smiled politely. "Coffee's fresh. Want a cup?" She waved her hand. "No time, hun. Well, I hate asking this again, but could I borrow $500? My landlord's being ridiculous about some late fee. I swear I'll pay you back once my check clears next week." I hesitated. "Elaine, I just helped you last month." She clasped her hands dramatically. "I know, and you've been a saint. But this is the last time. Promise." My husband Harold was in the den, pretending not to listen. He'd always been soft on his sister. She was the baby of the family, the one who never got a fair break. I sighed and opened the drawer where we kept the checkbook. "Fine," I said. "Just this once more." Elaine leaned over and kissed my cheek. "You're a lifesaver, Maggie. You always were the steady one." Funny thing about flattery, it softens your guard right before the knife goes in. Over the next few months, the requests didn't stop. They multiplied. Sometimes she called me crying. Sometimes she texted hearts and love yous. Sometimes she just sent her account number and a thumbs-up emoji. I started to feel uneasy, but Harold always brushed it off. "She's just struggling, Maggie," he said. "You know how she is. She'll get back on her feet." But I started keeping notes, dates, amounts, what she said the money was for. By spring, it added up to over $8,000. Still, I kept my mouth shut. Because that's what women like me do. We keep peace in the house. Then came the day everything changed. It was a warm Thursday morning in May. I had gone to the local credit union to withdraw a small amount, $400, for groceries and a donation to the church bake sale. The teller, a young woman named Lisa, greeted me with a familiar smile. "Morning, Mrs. Pierce. You're here early," I smiled. "Just running errands. I'll need to withdraw $400 from savings, please." She typed for a moment, then frowned slightly. Mrs. Pierce, it seems your savings account is almost empty." I blinked. "Empty? That's not possible." "We haven't touched it." She hesitated. "The withdrawals show transfers to another account. Same last name, E. Pierce. Does that sound familiar?" My heart stopped. "Elaine?" I whispered. Lisa nodded slowly. "It looks like multiple online transfers over several months. I can print the statement if you'd like." I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. "Yes, please do." The printer hummed, the sound almost mocking in its calmness. She handed me a thin stack of papers. Each line was a wound: $400, $200, $600, $900. All marked "Transfer to E. Pierce." I felt my stomach twist. Elaine didn't just take my money. She'd been quietly draining the joint savings account Harold and I had built over 40 years of work. When I got home, Harold was in his recliner, reading the paper like it was any other morning. I stood in the doorway, shaking. "Harold," I said. "Where's Elaine?" He looked up. "At her apartment, I guess. Why?" I tossed the papers onto his lap. "Because she's been stealing from us." He stared at the pages, then back at me, confused. "What do you mean, stealing?" "Look at the transfers," I snapped. 8,000 from me and another 12 from our savings. "That's $20,000, Harold. Gone." He sat up, color draining from his face. No, that can't. She wouldn't. She would. And she did. That night, the house felt colder. Harold tried calling her. No answer. Then a text came in hours later. Sorry, big bro. I'll fix it. I just needed help. Don't be mad at Maggie. She doesn't understand how hard it is for me right now. I grabbed the phone from his hand. She's trying to make me the problem. Harold rubbed his temples. She's always had issues managing money. Maybe we can— No, Harold, I interrupted. This isn't poor management. This is theft. He looked up at me like I was speaking a language he didn't know. She's my sister, Maggie, and I'm your wife. The one she's been robbing blind while smiling to my face. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark kitchen with the papers spread out in front of me, the numbers glowing faintly under the stove light. I kept replaying every moment she'd hugged me, every thank you, every "you're my favorite sister-in-law." All lies, crafted by someone who saw my kindness as weakness. I poured myself a cup of cold coffee and stared out the window. The garden I'd tended for years looked ghostly in the moonlight. Somewhere between the click of the clock and the hum of the fridge, something in me shifted. A quiet anger settled in, not the kind that burns fast and fades, but the kind that hardens. The next morning, I went to the bank again. I closed the account, then I opened a new one, in my name only. When I returned home, Harold sat at the kitchen table holding his phone. She says she wants to come over and explain, he said. Good, I replied. Let her. Elaine arrived an hour later, dressed like she was going to brunch, white blouse, gold earrings, smile bright as ever. Maggie, oh my gosh, this is all a big misunderstanding. Sit down, I said quietly. Her smile faltered. Okay, geez. What's with the tone? I slid the printed statements across the table. Recognize these? Her eyes darted to the paper, then back to me. That's not— Maggie, I swear I was going to tell you. I just borrowed it until— You borrowed it? My voice rose for the first time. Elaine, you stole it. You took money from an account you didn't even have access to legally. She leaned back, crossing her arms. Oh, please. Harold said I could use some of it if things got rough. I turned to him, my heart pounding. You said what? Harold's face went pale. I told her she could use a little, Maggie. For rent? I didn't think she'd take that much. Elaine smirked. See? It's not like I broke in or anything. The room spun. My hands trembled, but not from fear anymore, from the sheer betrayal sitting across from me. I stood up. Get out, she laughed. Oh, come on, don't be dramatic. We're family. You're not really going to make a scene, are you? I stepped closer, meeting her eyes. I'm not making a scene, I said quietly. I'm making a promise. Her smirk faltered. What kind of promise? I leaned in just enough for her to see I meant every word, the kind that ends with you wishing you never touched a dime of mine. Elaine left, muttering something about ungrateful people. Harold sat there in silence, guilt all over his face. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just gathered the papers, placed them in a folder, and locked them in my desk drawer. That's when the idea began forming. Slow, steady, deliberate. For years, I'd managed every household bill, every budget, every account. I knew where every cent went. Elaine thought she could take from me because I'd never fight back, but she'd forgotten something important. When you steal from someone who's patient, you're not just taking money, you're giving them time to plan. That night, I wrote in my journal, I let her take $20,000. She thinks she won, but she's about to learn what losing everything really feels like. Then I turned out the light, feeling something I hadn't felt in months, control. The next morning felt different. The kind of silence that sits on your shoulders, heavier than noise ever could. Harold and I ate breakfast without a word between us. He buttered his toast. I sipped my coffee. Between us lay the unspoken, the money, the betrayal, the fact that his sister had played us both like fools. Finally, he cleared his throat. Maggie, maybe we can fix this quietly. She's family. Family doesn't empty your savings behind your back, I said softly. Family doesn't lie every time they open their mouth. He looked small in that moment, a man torn between guilt and habit. She's all I've got left, Maggie, he whispered. And I'm right here, I said. You just forgot to notice. For the next few days, I watched Elaine's social media from my tablet. I'm not usually one for Facebook, but suddenly her hard times looked a lot like luxury. There she was, posing with a new designer handbag. Then a post about a weekend trip to Palm Springs, champagne glass in hand. Another one showing off her home makeover, complete with new furniture. My hands shook as I scrolled. She'd used my money, our retirement money, to fund her life of fake glamour. While she'd cried over the phone about overdue bills, she was sipping cocktails by the pool. I printed every photo, every caption, every timestamp. I placed them neatly in a folder beside the bank statements. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was documenting. 3 nights later, Harold came into the living room holding his phone. "She's coming by tomorrow," he said nervously. "She wants to apologize." I laughed, not a kind laugh, but the kind that comes when you've stopped expecting decency. "Apologize?" I said. "Or explain why stealing was actually a misunderstanding?" He sighed. "Maggie, please. Let's just hear her out." I stared at him for a long time. He looked older than I remembered, tired, uncertain. "Fine," I said finally. "But she won't be the only one doing the talking." The next afternoon, I baked a pie. Not because I wanted to, but because I wanted the illusion of normalcy. Elaine liked cherry, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that people speak more freely when they think they're winning. When she arrived, she was all charm again, big smile, perfectly manicured nails, and the same perfume that made my stomach twist. "Maggie, you didn't have to go to all this trouble," she said, eyeing the pie. I gestured to the table. "Sit down, Elaine." She sat, legs crossed, confident. Harold hovered awkwardly near the counter. "So," I said. "Let's hear it." She sighed dramatically. "Look, I know how this looks. I made mistakes. But things were rough, and I didn't think you'd mind. You're comfortable." I was desperate. "Desperate people don't redecorate their living rooms," I said. Her eyes flicked up, startled. I slid a photo across the table, her Facebook post with the caption, "Finally, my dream home look." Then another. "Weekend getaway. Self-care is important." Her face flushed. "That's not what it looks like." "Then tell me," I said calmly, "what does it look like?" She faltered. It was a gift. From a friend," I leaned forward, voice steady. "A friend named Margaret Pierce?" The room went still. Even Harold, who'd been silent, turned away in shame. Elaine shifted in her seat, her charm evaporating. "You're being dramatic," she said finally. "It's just money. You can't take it with you when you die, Maggie." Something inside me snapped. I stood so fast the chair screeched across the floor. "You're right," I said quietly. "You can't take it with you when you die. But you sure can lose it while you're alive." Her smirk vanished. "What's that supposed to mean?" I picked up the folder and tapped it against my hand. "This is what it means. Every cent you took, every photo you posted, every lie you told. I've kept it all." She laughed, high, nervous. "You're not serious. You wouldn't—" I met her gaze. "Elaine, I've spent my entire life being the kind of woman people think won't fight back. That's what you counted on." She crossed her arms. "So what are you going to do, sue me?" "Not exactly," I said. "I'm going to let you show everyone who you really are." After she left in a huff, Harold looked at me, wide-eyed. "Maggie, you're not really planning to go public with this, are you?" "I'm not planning to," I said. "I already did." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I forwarded the statements and screenshots to your brother, your niece, and the church's finance committee." Harold's mouth fell open. "Maggie—" "Let me finish," I said. "I also called the credit union fraud department. They're investigating her account for unauthorized transfers. I gave them permission to trace everyone." He rubbed his face. You've set off a bomb." I sat down, finally calm. "No, Harold," I said. I lit a candle. "Let's see who burns." That night, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts, calls, emails, all from Elaine. "How could you do this? You're ruining my life." "I'll pay it back, just stop." I turned the phone face down and went to bed. For the first time in months, I slept like a stone. The next morning, Harold didn't go into the office. He sat quietly on the porch, staring at nothing. "She called me 10 times, he said. Said the bank froze her account? Good, I said, sipping my coffee. Maybe she'll learn what empty really feels like." He sighed. "You could have told me." "I tried," I said simply. "You just didn't want to hear it." That weekend, word spread through the family. Elaine's reputation, the woman who always bragged about being too smart to struggle, began to crumble. Her cousin unfriended her. Her landlord demanded back rent. Her friends stopped responding to her stories. By Sunday afternoon, she was on our doorstep again, makeup streaked, voice trembling. "Maggie, please. You have to fix this. They're all turning against me. The bank says I could be charged." I looked at her, unblinking. "You stole from me," I said. "You lied to your brother. And now you want me to fix it?" She dropped to her knees right there on the porch. "Please, Maggie. I'll pay you back, I swear. I just need time." Harold stood behind me, eyes full of pity. "Let her in," he whispered. "She's family." I turned to him, voice like ice. "So was I." I closed the door gently. Not slammed, closed. And for the first time, the sound of that latch felt like peace. The next day, I got a call from the bank's fraud department. "Mrs. Pierce, thank you for bringing this to our attention," the man said. "We've confirmed unauthorized transfers from your joint account. The case will move forward legally," I exhaled slowly. "Will we get the money back?" "Part of it," he said. "The rest depends on the investigation." That night, I told Harold everything. He looked like a man trying to stand in two worlds, one where family was sacred and one where truth had consequences. "She's my sister," he said again quietly. "And I'm your wife," I said. "The one who never asked for anything except honesty." He nodded, eyes wet. "I know. And I failed you." Over the next few weeks, Elaine's life unraveled faster than I imagined. The fraud case went public within the family. She lost her job at the insurance office after her manager heard about it, and her lease was terminated for missed payments. I didn't celebrate it. I just let it happen. But karma has a funny way of finding its rhythm. Because one afternoon, I received an envelope, plain, unmarked, slipped into the mailbox. Inside was a money order for $2,000 and a handwritten note. "I'm sorry. Please don't hate me. I never thought it would go this far." I read it 3 times. The ink was smudged, as if tears had fallen onto the paper. I folded it neatly and placed it in my journal, between the pages of my first entry, the one that said, "She thinks she won." That night, Harold sat beside me, holding the check. "Do you want to cash it?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I want to remember it," he frowned. "You're not going to forgive her, are you?" "I will," I said. "But not now. Forgiveness means nothing if the person doesn't understand the weight of what they've done." He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not as the quiet wife who kept peace, but as the woman who protected what mattered. Days turned into weeks. I started walking in the mornings again, tending my garden, reading before bed. Peace came back slowly, like sunlight creeping into a cold room. One afternoon, I heard from Lisa, the bank teller. "Mrs. Pierce," she said, "we managed to recover a bit more of your funds. The case closed in your favor." "Thank you," I said softly. She hesitated, then added, "You're not the first person she's done this to. But you're the first one who made her face it." That night, I sat on the porch, looking at the stars. Harold joined me, quiet for a while before speaking. "She called again," he said. "She's moving out of state. Said she wants to start over." I nodded slowly. "Good. Maybe she'll learn that starting over doesn't mean taking from others." He looked at me, remorse softening his face. "You were right, Maggie. You always are," I smiled faintly. "No, Harold. I was just done being wronged." Before going to bed, I opened my journal again and wrote, "When kindness is mistaken for weakness, remember this, even gentle hands can close doors quietly, forever." By June, the roses in my garden had started to bloom again, deep red, the kind that carried the scent of both sweetness and warning. It had been 2 months since Elaine's world had started to crumble. She hadn't spoken to us since that final note, though sometimes I'd see her car pass down our street, pausing for just a second too long near our mailbox. Maybe she wanted to apologize again. Maybe she just wanted to see if we'd forgiven her. Either way, I didn't owe her that comfort. Life in our house had changed too. Harold had gone from defensive to distant, not out of anger, but guilt. Every morning, I'd find him sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring out at the yard. She was always a handful, he said one morning. Even when we were kids, always taking things that weren't hers. I didn't respond right away. I was trimming the roses, listening to the snip of my shears. Maybe she learned that because no one ever stopped her, I said. He sighed. I guess that's on me. No, I said gently. It's on her. But we all helped her believe she could get away with it. He nodded slowly, eyes glassy with regret. A week later, the phone rang while I was folding laundry. It was the credit union manager. Mrs. Pierce, he said politely. Just wanted to let you know, the case has been officially resolved. The court ruled in your favor, meaning? I asked. Elaine has been ordered to repay the amount in installments. We've already recovered part of it through her frozen assets. The rest will come gradually. Thank you, I said calmly. I appreciate the update. But when I hung up, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt emptiness because money wasn't the real loss here. It was trust. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after Harold had gone to bed. I pulled out my journal, flipping through pages of neat handwriting, evidence of everything that had happened. Every emotion I couldn't say aloud. Then, without really planning to, I began writing something new. To the people we love who think kindness is weakness, thank you. You reminded us that patience has limits and silence isn't consent. When I finished, I realized what I was really writing wasn't just for me. It was for every woman who'd ever been taken advantage of, who'd ever smiled through deceit just to keep the peace. The next morning, I called the local community center. Hi, this is Margaret Pierce, I said. I used to volunteer here years ago. I was wondering if you're still looking for speakers for your women's finance workshops. The coordinator, a kind younger woman named Rita, responded warmly. Oh, yes. We'd love that, Mrs. Pierce. We actually just lost one of our regulars. Do you have a topic in mind? I smiled to myself. I do, I said. It's called Kindness and Control, How to Protect What's Yours. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of a room full of women, most of them around my age, some younger, some older. They came with notebooks and worried expressions, the kind of faces that carried years of quiet giving. I took a deep breath and began. I once thought helping someone meant saying yes every time they asked, I said softly. But I learned, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is say no. A few women nodded slowly. My husband's sister used to call me her best friend, I continued. She said she was struggling. I gave and gave until one day I looked at my bank account and realized she hadn't just taken my money, she'd taken my peace. There were gasps, murmurs. One woman in the front row whispered, "Oh, I know that story." I smiled faintly. We all do. By the end of that session, I had 3 new invitations to speak at other community events. The local newspaper wrote a short feature titled, Retired Secretary Teaches Women to Take Back Financial Power. I didn't mention Elaine's name. I didn't have to. But everyone knew the type of person I was talking about. When the article went online, something unexpected happened. The story spread. I started receiving emails from women in other towns, thanking me for speaking up. One wrote, "My sister did the same thing. I thought I was alone. Thank you for showing that standing up doesn't make you cruel. It makes you free." That one made me cry. Then one evening, Harold came home with a strange look on his face. "You'll never guess who I ran into at the grocery store," he said. I looked up from the paper. "Elaine?" He nodded. "She looks rough. Said she's been working at a diner in Salem. She asked if you'd be willing to talk." I set down the paper. "And what did you say?" "I told her you'd think about it." I stared at him for a long time. "Why would you say that?" "Because I think she really is sorry, Maggie. She said losing everything made her realize what she'd done." I stood and went to the window, staring out at the fading light. "People don't change because they lose things," I said quietly. "They change when they face what they did." He said nothing after that. That night I dreamed of her, Elaine, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, holding a fork, eating cherry pie like nothing ever happened. Only this time I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. The next morning, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name written in shaky handwriting. Inside was a short note and a folded clipping from the local newspaper. "Maggie, I saw the article. I'm proud of you. I know you'll never forgive me, but I want you to know you made me better. Thank you for being stronger than I deserved. Elaine." Beneath it was a photo of her in a diner uniform, smiling with another waitress. And tucked behind the note, a small check for $1,000. I didn't cash it. I didn't tear it up either. I put it in the same journal where I'd kept her first apology note. Because forgiveness, I realized, doesn't always mean letting someone back in. Sometimes it just means letting them go. Weeks later, Rita from the community center called again. "Mrs. Pierce, we've been getting a lot of attention from your sessions. Would you consider turning them into a small course? Maybe even a guidebook?" I chuckled softly. "A guidebook? Yes. You could help so many people," she said enthusiastically. "I know a local publisher who'd love to work with you." I hesitated, thinking about it. Writing something permanent, something that could outlive the pain, felt right. "All right," I said finally. "Let's do it." Over the next month, I poured everything I'd learned into that little guide, not just about money, but about boundaries, manipulation, and emotional recovery. I called it The Cost of Yes. It wasn't fancy, just plain talk, simple advice, and real stories from women who'd been betrayed and rebuilt themselves. When it was done, I dedicated it quietly, for every kind heart that refused to harden, and for the strength that comes when it finally does. The book sold modestly at first, mostly to local groups and small libraries, but soon something strange happened again. A women's podcast picked up the story, calling it a wake-up call for caregivers. They asked to interview me, and that's when everything came full circle. The day of the interview, I sat in front of a microphone for the first time in my life. The host asked, "Mrs. Pierce, what made you decide to share your experience publicly?" I smiled gently. "Because I realize silence only protects the wrong person." She nodded. "And what would you say to someone who feels betrayed by family, but doesn't want to be cruel by speaking up?" I paused for a moment, choosing my words. "Kindness doesn't mean allowing people to hurt you," I said softly. "It means protecting what's good, even from the ones you love." When the interview aired, the messages poured in again, hundreds of them this time, but one stood out. It was from an unfamiliar email address. The message was short. I listened. I cried. "You were right." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. For the first time in years, the story wasn't about her anymore. It was about me and the countless others who'd been told to keep quiet. One evening, as summer ended, Harold joined me in the garden. The air was thick with the smell of lavender and earth. He said softly, "You know, I used to think forgiveness was just saying, 'It's okay.' And now?" I asked. "Now I think it's about not letting what they did decide who you are." I smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "That's exactly right." That night, as the sun dipped low and fireflies began to dance, I wrote one last entry in my journal. "She took my money, but I took back my voice. She spent my savings, but I invested in myself. And in the end, I came out richer than she'll ever be." I closed the book, tucked it in the drawer beside my bed, and turned off the light. It had been nearly 6 months since the whole ordeal with Elaine began, and though my days had grown quiet again, the silence wasn't empty anymore. I filled it with purpose, the garden, the workshops, the little book that somehow found its way into more hands than I ever expected. The pain had dulled into something manageable, like an old scar, visible, but not tender to the touch, until the invitation arrived. It was a cream-colored envelope with gold lettering, elegant, careful, formal. Inside, the card read, "Family Reunion, hosted by Daniel and Meredith Pierce, Saturday, September 14th, 5 p.m. at the Old River Hall. Please join us for dinner and celebration." I stared at the names. Daniel, my husband's nephew. Meredith, his wife. And of course, family, which meant one thing. Elaine would be there. I placed the card on the table, feeling that familiar unease crawl back up my spine. When Harold came in from the yard, I handed it to him without a word. He read it, then looked up slowly. Are you going? I don't know, I said. Are you? He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Dan's been wanting to reconnect. It's been a long time since we saw everyone. I gave him a look. You mean since your sister burned every bridge she crossed? He didn't argue, just set the card down beside mine and said quietly, maybe it's time to see if she's changed. All week, I thought about it. Part of me wanted to stay home, tend my roses, and let that chapter remain closed. But another part, the part that had learned the cost of silence, wanted to look her in the eye and see if she'd truly learned anything at all. So I decided I would go. Not for closure, but for confirmation. Saturday came, mild and golden. I put on a simple navy dress and a pearl brooch Harold had given me years ago. As I pinned it, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Older, yes, but stronger too. The kind of woman who'd learned the difference between keeping peace and keeping dignity. When we arrived at River Hall, laughter spilled out from the open doors. Tables lined with candles and buffet trays glowed under soft lights. Children ran between chairs while cousins hugged and posed for pictures. And there, near the far wall, Elaine. She was thinner than I remembered. Hair tied up neatly, makeup understated. Her posture was smaller somehow, like the air around her had shrunk. When she saw me, her smile flickered. Then she straightened, smoothed her blouse, and walked toward us. Margaret, she said softly. You look well, I smiled politely. I am, she hesitated. Harold, he nodded stiffly. Elaine, an awkward pause hung between us. Finally, she said, can we talk? Somewhere private? I looked around. Everyone was laughing, chatting, unaware of the quiet earthquake happening 3 feet away. No, I said calmly. If you have something to say it here. Her eyes darted nervously toward the tables. Maggie, please, not now. This isn't the place. This is exactly the place, I said. Because for once, you're not going to hide behind excuses. A few heads turned. Daniel, noticing the tension, started walking over. Everything okay here? He asked, uncertain. Just catching up, I said coolly. Elaine swallowed hard. I wanted to apologize, she said quickly. For everything. I've been trying to make it right. You probably won't believe that, but it's true. Trying to make it right? I repeated. By what? Moving away? Sending small checks like peace offerings? Her face paled. I didn't mean it like that. No, you meant it exactly like that, I said, my voice steady. You thought if you sent just enough guilt in an envelope, it would balance the scale. But some things aren't about the money, Elaine. People nearby had gone quiet. The music had dimmed. Even Daniel looked torn between confusion and discomfort. Harold touched my arm. Maggie, I turned to him gently. No, this needs to happen. Then back to her. When you stole from me, you didn't just take savings. You took trust. You took the one thing that made this family feel safe. And the worst part is, you didn't even think you'd done anything wrong. Elaine's eyes filled with tears. I was desperate. You were greedy, I corrected. There's a difference, she wiped at her face. I lost everything, Maggie. My job, my home, my friends. Wasn't that punishment enough? I took a slow breath. You didn't lose those things because I punished you. You lost them because you finally had to live without lying. The room was silent now. Even the kids had gone still. Then, something unexpected happened. Daniel, quiet, kind Daniel, stepped forward. Aunt Maggie, he said softly, I think she's been trying. She's been helping at the diner, paying back what she can. Maybe she's really changing. I looked at him, this young man who'd grown up watching his aunt charm her way through every crisis. And I saw the hope in his face. I hope you're right, I said. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. Elaine looked down, trembling. I don't expect you to forgive me. I already did, I said simply. Her head snapped up, confused. You did? Yes, I said. Because forgiveness isn't for you, Elaine. It's for me. I let go the day I stopped wishing you'd change. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then she whispered, I really am sorry. I know, I said. And I hope you mean it this time. I started to walk away, but she caught my sleeve. Wait, before you go, I need to tell you something. I turned back, wary. She swallowed hard. When I first took the money, I told myself it was a loan. I thought I'd win it back, at the casino. Gasps rippled through the family. I stared at her, stunned. Casino? She nodded miserably. I thought I could double it, pay you back, fix everything. But I kept losing. And every time I lost, I took more. I was ashamed, Maggie. I was so ashamed I couldn't stop. My heart sank. Not out of sympathy, but out of exhaustion. There was always another excuse. Another reason? Another, I didn't mean to. You didn't ruin your life because of shame, I said quietly. You ruined it because you thought the rules didn't apply to you. I walked away then, not angry, just finished. Behind me, I heard Harold sigh deeply. When I turned back, he was kneeling beside his sister, speaking softly. For a second, I saw them as children, a brother and sister from another lifetime, one always fixing what the other broke. And I understood something. I couldn't heal their bond for them. All I could do was live in truth. I stepped outside into the cool evening air. The sky was streaked with violet and orange, the smell of barbecue smoke drifting from the hall. I stood there breathing deeply until Harold came out to join me. You okay? He asked. I nodded. I am now. He slipped his hand into mine. You were strong in there. I didn't know you had that in you. I smiled faintly. Neither did she. The next week, something unexpected arrived in the mail again. A letter from Elaine, this time neatly typed, folded carefully inside an envelope with no perfume, no dramatics. Maggie, you didn't have to forgive me, but you did anyway. I've joined a support group for compulsive gambling. I'm clean now. 3 months. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make what's left of my life honest. I hope someday you'll see me as someone who finally learned. Elaine, I read it twice, then a third time. And for the first time since all of this began, I believed her. Not because of the words, but because there was no begging in them. No performance, just truth. That night, Harold came into the kitchen and found me holding the letter. What's that? From your sister, I said. She's in recovery. He exhaled slowly, relief mixing with disbelief. Maybe there's hope after all. There's always hope, I said softly. Just not always trust, he smiled sadly. That's fair. The next Sunday, I stood before the women at the community center again, my last scheduled talk for the year. As I spoke, I felt lighter somehow. Like every word wasn't just about protecting what's yours. It was about reclaiming what they tried to take: dignity, peace, power. When I finished, the applause was warm, genuine. Afterward, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. My mom went through the same thing, she said. But she never stood up for herself. I wish she had someone like you to listen to. I smiled, resting a hand on hers. Then be that person for her now. It's never too late to stop being silent. That night, I wrote in my journal again. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment. Sometimes it's just about being heard. Tonight I was heard. I closed the book and turned off the light. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a victim of Elaine's choices. I felt like the author of my own ending. The first frost came early that year. I remember standing on the porch one morning, watching the white glaze spread across my garden like powdered sugar over a forgotten cake. The roses were gone now, just brittle stems and memory. And yet somehow I didn't feel sad. There's a strange comfort in endings. They make space for beginnings you didn't see coming. It had been 3 months since the family reunion. 3 months since that night when Elaine had finally looked me in the eye and admitted the truth. We hadn't spoken since, not directly. But I'd gotten her letter, typed neatly, humble, and free of excuses. I'd kept it on the mantel, tucked beneath a photo of Harold and me from our anniversary trip to Cannon Beach. Not because I wanted to remember what she'd done, but because it reminded me what I'd survived. Life had gone on quietly. Harold had softened too, a little slower now, a little gentler with his words. He'd taken up small carpentry projects in the garage again, like he used to years ago. Sometimes I'd peek out the window and see him sanding an old stool or fixing a chair, humming under his breath. It was his way of mending what couldn't be said out loud. And me? I was writing again. The community center course had turned into a small book, and that book had turned into invitations, talks, interviews, even a mention in a regional magazine. I didn't set out to become the woman who teaches people to stand up for themselves, but somehow that's what I became. One afternoon, As I was setting the table for dinner, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there she was, Elaine. She looked different, older, tired, but calm. Her hair was tied back loosely, her makeup simple. She wore a gray coat and held a small brown envelope in her hands. "Hi, Maggie," she said softly. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then I stepped aside. "Come in." She hesitated before crossing the threshold, as though stepping into a past she wasn't sure she was welcome in. The smell of pot roast filled the kitchen. She looked around, her eyes landing on the photo of Harold and me on the wall. "Place looks the same," she said. "Some things are worth keeping that way," I replied. She smiled faintly, then grew serious. "I didn't come to cause trouble," she said. "I just wanted to give you this." She held out the envelope. I took it slowly, feeling its weight. "What is it?" "Final payment," she said. "From the repayment plan. I took extra shifts. It's all there. Every cent I owed you, I didn't open it. Instead, I placed it gently on the counter. You didn't have to come in person," I said quietly. "I did," she said, "because I needed you to see I wasn't running anymore." For a while, we just stood there, the quiet filling every inch of the kitchen. Finally, I gestured toward the table. "You want some tea?" She blinked, surprised. "Tea?" "Yes," I said. "The kettle's already warm," she nodded, her lips trembling just a little. "I'd like that." We sat across from each other, the steam from the cups curling between us like ghosts of all the words we'd never said. After a long sip, she spoke. "I've been clean for 6 months," she said. "I go to meetings every week. I got a job at a small bakery in town. It's not glamorous, but it's honest." I nodded slowly. "That's good," she smiled sadly. "I still see your face every time I walk past the bank. I think about how much I hurt you." "You hurt yourself more," I said gently. "You just didn't realize it at the time." She looked down, tracing her finger along the rim of the cup. "I was jealous of you, you know. You always had everything together. The house, the marriage, the peace. I wanted that." I met her eyes. "You could have had it too, Elaine. But you thought taking from others would fill what was empty inside you?" She nodded. "I know, and I'm sorry." We sat in silence for a while. Then she whispered, "Do you think Harold hates me?" "No," I said softly. "But he doesn't know how to love you the same way anymore." Tears welled in her eyes. "That's fair." I reached across the table and placed my hand on hers. Her skin was cold, trembling slightly. "I don't hate you, Elaine," I said. "I just had to stop losing myself trying to save you." She let out a shaky breath. "You really are stronger than I ever thought." I smiled faintly. "You helped me learn that." Before she left, she turned at the door and looked back. "I know I can't make up for everything," she said. "But I hope someday, when you think of me, it won't be with anger." "It won't be," I said. "It'll be with understanding." She nodded, eyes shining, and walked away into the cold evening. When Harold came home, I told him what happened. He didn't say anything for a long while. Then he smiled, soft, relieved. "She came, huh?" "She did, and I think she finally meant it this time." He nodded slowly. "Maybe we can all sleep a little easier now." I smiled. "Maybe." A few weeks later, an envelope arrived from Salem. Inside was a card with a picture of fresh-baked bread and a note. "First week as assistant baker. The smell alone makes me feel alive again. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it. Love, Elaine." I pinned the card to the fridge, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as proof that broken people can choose to rebuild. That winter, I started teaching a new workshop, this one called Rebuilding After Betrayal. It wasn't about money this time. It was about healing, about learning to stand tall again without bitterness weighing you down. Women came from all over, some divorced, some estranged from children, some still living with people who drained them emotionally. Each one carried her own version of my story. One woman, gray-haired and soft-spoken, said quietly, "I thought I was weak for staying silent all these years." I smiled gently. "You're not weak, you're kind, and kindness only becomes strength when it finally draws a line." The room was quiet, every head nodding. That was the moment I realized. Forgiveness wasn't surrender. It was the final act of power. One night, as snow fell outside, Harold joined me by the fireplace. He was holding an old photo album, one I hadn't opened in years. He flipped through pages until he stopped at one, a faded picture of him and Elaine as kids, sitting on a picnic blanket, grinning with missing teeth. "She wasn't always like that," he said softly. "She used to be the one who gave me her last cookie." I looked at the photo. "People change, Harold. Sometimes the good parts get buried. But they're still there." He nodded, eyes misty. "You think she'll be okay?" "I do," I said. "Because this time, she's not pretending to be." Weeks passed. The world moved on quietly. And then one morning, a letter arrived from the local newspaper. "Dear Mrs. Pierce, your community work has inspired many. We'd like to honor you at our annual Women of Strength luncheon next month." I laughed softly when I read it. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be receiving an award for strength after nearly losing everything, I would have thought it was a cruel joke. But life has a funny way of rewarding those who don't give up on themselves. The day of the luncheon, I wore the same navy dress I'd worn to that family reunion months ago. As I stood at the podium, looking out at the room full of faces, mothers, grandmothers, daughters, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I used to think strength was about keeping everyone happy, I began. But real strength is knowing when enough is enough. It's learning that you can love someone and still close the door on their chaos. The room was silent, every word hanging heavy in the air. "I'm not proud of what happened to me," I continued, "but I'm proud of who I became because of it." When I finished, the applause wasn't loud, it was warm, honest, the kind that feels like understanding. That evening, when Harold and I came home, the sun was setting behind the trees. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, the world quiet in that tender way it gets before night settles in. We sat on the porch, our hands intertwined, watching the horizon. He said softly, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stood up to her?" "All the time," I said. "And I thank God I did," he chuckled. "You know, Maggie, I think you saved her life," I smiled. "Maybe, but more importantly, I saved my own." Later that night, I went to my desk and opened my journal one last time. The pages were full now, full of pain, lessons, and quiet victories. On the very last page, I wrote, "She thought she took my money. But what she really took was my fear, and I'm never taking that back." I closed the book, placed it gently in the drawer, and whispered a prayer for peace, hers, mine, and everyone's who's ever been betrayed but chose not to break. Then I turned off the light. The night was still. The air smelled faintly of winter and wood smoke, and for the first time in years, I felt whole again. Before this story ends, if someone stole from you money, trust, or peace, would you let karma handle it, or take your own quiet revenge? Tell me in the comments below.